So welcome everybody to ITD2. This is actually week number 2, but week number 1 didn't happen because of Thanksgiving, right? Because hopefully everybody was enjoying lots of turkey and ham and hopefully mashed potatoes, because they're one of my favorites. All right, so what I thought we could do today is start by going over week number 1 stuff, and then we can kind of go into more along the lines of week number 2 as well. So let me go ahead and start a full sail window for us, hopefully. This is always fun because it's like taking forever to load. It's one of those type of things. But in the meantime, did everybody have a good Thanksgiving? Everybody enjoy it? Yes, good. Did everybody get to do something fun along the way? All right. Cool. Well, I'm actually back home in Indiana because normally I'm based out of Orlando, but this Thanksgiving I went home to Indiana, so I'm actually still up here. So it's kind of nice. It's kind of cold, but what can you do? All right, so let's go ahead and look at the basics of it. Giselle says it was too short. It always is too short. Yeah. Oh, it's cold in Ingrid. You're in Orlando too, right? Oh yeah, I heard it got down to 40. I can't really complain because it was like 32 here. But 40 is pretty cold for Orlando. I agree. All right, so let's go over some week number 1 stuff, right? So week number 1 was mostly just about welcoming you to the course, and I agree, Ingrid, and trying to get you to set up all the different stuff that you need. The most important one is Slack Messenger, because that's how you reach us. Now, you should have done that in your ITD1 course, but you just need to make sure that you join the ITD2 channel. That's really the only difference between that. And the next big thing is setting up your coding editor. Now, your coding editor is going to be our Visual Studio for Mac. And it is wonderful, and you guys are going to love it, okay? Now, we'll go through a couple of things as soon as we start coding about how to set up the basic files and where they go, and just to make sure we're all on the same page for that kind of stuff. Now, then on week number 1, we had a review from ITD1. So in ITD1, it was all about teaching you the basics of variables, kind of what holds what and what kind of different data types we have. And then it kind of went through conditionals and ended up at loops. So just to kind of make sure that we're all on the same page, we have a little bit of the review. And then we started as a review for loops as well, because loops are going to be a giant part of working with arrays and lists, which are both going to be the focus of week number 1, right? So we went through the two different types of loops you guys learned, which was while and for loops. Is everybody good with the basics of loops so far? Everybody in the live session, does everybody have any kind of questions about that? Okay. So then we started doing something new where we started doing arrays and lists. Now, arrays and lists are going to be more complex of a data type. So a simple data type is like a string or a number or like a different type of number, like an integer or a decimal or a double or anything like that, right? So the array is going to be more complex because it is one variable, but it holds multiple values. So we always kind of picture it like a shelf and then multiple boxes sitting on the shelf, right? So we kind of use that one for arrays and lists. Now, the main difference between arrays and lists, does anybody actually know the main difference? Anybody in the live section? What is the main difference between arrays and lists? Anybody know? I'm gonna start my Jeopardy music. I really do need Jeopardy music. Dun, dun, dun. No? Okay. So the main difference is going to be arrays are immutable. And immutable is just a fancy word for it can't change, right? And lists are going to be mutable. And you can always think mutant if you're superhero people. Mutant just means changing and mutating, right? Yeah, perfect, Ingrid. So basically the difference between that is arrays, once we set up the length of the array, it's basically a shelf of a certain length and it can only hold those boxes, right? Now with a list, we basically make a blank shelf and then we can add boxes as we go along. And if we run out of space on our shelf, we just kind of add to the shelf. Now, the cool part is, as Ingrid said, we can remove things from that shelf as well. Now, the problem with that is that the index numbers keep changing. So you got to make sure that you're watching the index numbers of a list because they might one time might be the, let's say, index number 2, but if you remove something before it, it slides down to number 1. So you got to be like aware of that. That's the main change for that. Now, when we started talking about list, we also went into a new type of loop, and it's going to be a for each loop. Now, for each loops are wonderful if we're just cycling through data collections variables, right? And a collection variable just means like kind of what it says, right? A collection of values that store in a variable. So that's going to be arrays, lists, and for week number 2, we're going to get into dictionaries. Now, for each loops are nice because they basically create a temporary variable that takes the value of each of those different elements, and then you can use it inside of that. Now, the problem with that is that you cannot change any elements using a for each loop. It is only for output, never for changing anything inside of it. If you do have to change something inside of an array, a list, or a dictionary, then you have to use a for loop. Okay, that's the main thing, because then for loop allows you to directly access the element itself instead of a copy or something like that. All right. Okay, so that is all week number 1. Does anybody have any kind of questions about anything from week number 1? Any questions about while loops, for loops, conditionals, I guess? Anything for arrays or lists? We'll do like an auction, going once, going twice. All right. Sounds good. So while you guys are thinking, so maybe Ingrid already said no, but that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and start a new file for us to code inside of when we start talking about dictionaries, which we're going to get into for week number 2. Now, when I create this, when I hit a new button, I'm going to make sure that I choose my console app, and it's going to be a C# app. Now, you might find those under web and console, under apps, usually under general, and then it'll be under console application, and just make sure it is C# instead of F#. Okay. Now, the next screen, some people get this and some people don't. So about half the students are like, hey, I never see my target framework. And the other half are like, what is this target framework? So if you see it, just go ahead and choose the .NET Core of the highest number. So .NET Core 3.1. Don't be confused because .NET 5 is going to be different than our .NET Core. Okay, so just make sure you stick with the .NET cores. Then hit next. Oh, and if you don't get that, don't worry about it because it automatically defaults to that as well. Then we name our project. So project name. For this one, what I'm going to do is call it ITD2. I'm going to do underscores live session. And this is going to be week 2. Week number 2. Now, the important thing for this one is we can actually change the location that we're going to be creating these projects in, right? So by default, it puts it in our user folder under our username and then our projects. Now, let me drag on here the Mac hard drive. So this is kind of the easiest way if you have your Mac hard drive on your desktop. If you don't, you can just pull up any Finder window. The easiest way for that is Command and Spacebar. So that will just be the Command or Spotlight, and you can just type in Finder. That brings that up as well. Let's go ahead and do it the other way. So Macintosh hard drive. And then inside of here, you're going to look for your particular home folder. Now, usually that's in your favorites and it will be symbolized by that little home icon. But if you can't find it, just on that very upper left-hand corner, go to Go and Home. Go and Home. And that will take you automatically to your user folder. Now, if you go back over here, we're going to say inside of my user folder, inside of me particularly, then I'm going to go to my projects. So I'm going to go on projects, and here are all of my different files that I've created in my Visual Studio. Now, of course, we can change this to any location, and I'll show you that in just a minute as well. Okay, you can do it for each one just by going to the Browse button, and you can choose a different folder. That kind of gets annoying if you do it multiple times, so I'll show you how to permanently change that as well. Now, once we actually create this, it went ahead and created our ITD2 live session week number 2, all the files and folders that went with it, right? So I still have a couple students turning in just the program.cs file, just one file, which is not correct. Or some students turn in the SLN, which by the way stands for solution file, but that's not correct either. What we do need is for you to go to the main folder that contains everything else, then just right mouse click or command and click, and then just go to compress. So after you go to compress, basically it's going to give you a zipped file. It's going to be right there. Kind of always comes up in a new window, but it basically is the same thing right here. And that's the zip file that you're going to turn into. Okay. All right. So now that we actually have up our Visual Studio, I can go to the preferences and show you a couple different things inside of here. So if I go to Visual Studio at the top left-hand corner and come down to preferences, we have a couple different things we can do. One of them at the very top, you're going to find is projects. And under projects, you're going to find load and save. Okay, so these are just the little toggle buttons in case you see them like that. Just go to the projects, go to load and save. And here is your default solution location. So this can actually be changed to any folder. So a lot of students will actually create a whole folder on their desktop for, let's say, Full Sail, and then they'll create a folder for each class they take. So you can actually change this per class that you're going to take as well. So then it will kind of automatically default to that. You don't have to change it each and every time. So that's the default location for that. Now, the other thing that's kind of newer, and there's a whole video about this as well, but it is internal versus external terminal. Okay, so by default, mine and I suggest using the external one. So what I mean by that is when you hit the play button or run button in the upper left-hand corner, it's going to launch its own separate terminal window, and you can actually have that as an external terminal. Okay, now the default is going to be the internal terminal, and how to change that, or if you prefer the internal one, you can go to Visual Studio, down to Preferences again, and then here you're going to go all the way down to almost the very end and find the Other tab. Under the Other tab, click on Terminal, and then you can actually choose to check or uncheck enable that integrated terminal. And I'm just going to show you the difference. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it on for a minute and then launch it. And you'll see here is my terminal over here. Now you can pin it to a different thing. Some people have it on the bottom, some people put it on the side. Mostly for me, because my code is very long, so I keep it on the side as well. So this is the terminal. So it's a personal preference. At that point, you can kind of use either one. Either one is acceptable for the class. All right, for this example, I'm going to go ahead and go back to preferences and uncheck that because I like the external one. The other cool thing about the external terminal is you can actually change the coloring of it. So mine is black with green letters because I think it's the easiest to see when you're looking at a computer screen or online for you guys. If you guys want to change that, you can actually go to terminal at the top once you click on the actual terminal window itself. So not on the Visual Studio, because notice it changes that menu system. But if you click on the terminal one, you can actually then click on preferences as well, and you can change any of the profiles. So go to Profiles tab, and you can change those to anything you want. Make it different colors and make it all fancy for yourselves. All right, everybody with me so far? Any questions? So I'm going to go ahead and start with a multi-lined comment, and I'm just going to put my name at the top, like you guys should always start your code. Let's put today's date, which is 12/03/2020. We're almost done with 2020. I cannot wait. ITD2, and then I'm just going to call this one live session. And let's go week 2 for that. And then I'm going to end my multi-lined comment. Okay, now for this, remember I am going to record this and I'm going to post it back into our Slack channel, and I'm going to post it back into our page on FSO. So where you got the link for this, the link for this video that once it's done is going to be posted there. So if you don't want to code along with me now, you can always go back and reference this as well. So don't feel like you have to kind of speed code with me, okay? Anything like that. All right, so live class. What do you guys want to see? Do you guys want to work more with arrays and lists, or do you want to jump into dictionaries? What do you guys want to see? What do you guys want to know more about? Dictionaries, arrays and loops. Okay, so arrays and loops. We'll go ahead and start there. So arrays and loops. So there's a couple different ways of dealing with arrays and loops and kind of stuff like that, right? One of the things that I ask you to do in your homework that's kind of a little bit confusing for some students is trying to prompt the user for maybe putting that value inside of the different array elements, right? So maybe we'll cover that first. Does that sound good? Everybody okay with that? All right, so let's cover some arrays and loops. Okay, so for this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a variable, and specifically I'm going to create an integer, and this is going to be the number of, we need to be able to list something. So we can make a list of board games or movies or superheroes. What do you guys want to keep track of? My favorite animes, comic books, video games is the winner. So let's go ahead and keep track of a number of video games. Jasmine, you said superheroes too late, but we'll do that one for the dictionaries. So And Giselle says anime. Okay, we're gonna have to do lots of examples, but maybe we'll do anime, superhero, video games, and just call it once. So number of video games that we want to keep track of. We want to keep track of. Okay. By the way, I'm the worst speller in the world. So anything you see misspelled, it's probably my own fault. So I'm going to go ahead and create an int, and I'm going to put num of games. Let's put video games maybe. I'm going to set that equal to maybe 3 to start with. Okay. Now, the cool thing about this one is that we can actually make this come from anywhere, right? So we're hard coding this now, but this could easily be from a read line. We can then use a try parse, and then we can actually get an integer from that, right? Or actually, do you guys want to see that instead? Do you guys want to hard code this, or do you want to prompt the user for it? I'm good with either one you want. Prompt the user. Okay, so since we're going to be prompting the user, I'm going to go ahead and not start that with a value. All right, and then I'm going to actually come a little bit above that then, and let's go ahead and prompt the user for the number of video games in their collection. Okay, so anytime we're going to prompt the user, that's just fancy programming speak for using a console write line, like printing text out to the console, right? So I'll teach you guys one of my favorite keyboard shortcuts. This has saved me so much time in my life. It is CW, like the network, and then tab. So CW tab automatically writes out console.writeLine, open closing parentheses, and a semicolon. It's my favorite keyboard shortcut ever. So inside of there, I'm just going to put a set of double quotes, /r, / and n. And then we're going to say something like, how many video games do you have in your collection? Question mark. Now, of course, after we prompt the user, the next step is to capture their response. Who can tell me what kind of data type we actually should capture this in? What kind of data type do we use to capture response from a user? Nice, Ingrid. Oh, wait a minute, I missed the what? Question mark, exclamation point. Was the what question mark, exclamation point for the shortcut, hopefully? Jasmine, you're ahead of me, but you are correct. Yeah, so Ingrid likes the shortcut. So yeah, CW, tab, favorite thing in the world. But weirdly, that's the one I use because there's not a keyboard shortcut for console read line. That should be like CR -- but that's not right? It doesn't really work. So sadly, no. But you can create your own keyboard shortcuts, but it's specific for each person at that point, so I can't really show it, right? Okay, so Ingrid is correct, and we're going to combine it with what Jasmine said, which is also correct. And so we're going to make a string, and this is going to be the string version of it, because remember, a read line only brings in one data type, and that is a string. And we have to convert it to any other data type that we need it to be. So we're going to say string. We're going to put num games string, and remember I put string after this, and I show this in some of my videos as well, because that marks this as the string version of the number of games, right? Some students will put num of games and then put num of games, or num games int, or some other weird stuff, and then it gets very confusing very fast when you're dealing with a lot of stuff. And then the longer your code gets, the more weird your variable names will become, so you don't want to get trapped in that at all. Okay, so just put whatever you're going to call that thing. Actually, I called it number of video games, so I might as well put that over here. Boop, num of video games string. There we go. Then we'll set that equal to our console.readLine, open closing, and then a semicolon. Okay. Thanks, Ingrid. All right, so then after we get our read line, then we have to actually start our validation. So validation, perfect. So the first step of validation, when we're going to be changing this into an integer, is making sure that we create that integer to hold the value. Okay. Now we're going to need a while loop, because remember, all validation must be done using while loops. Now, what kind of validation should I be using here? Who can tell me what kind of validation? Open closing, curlies. I'm just making a basic structure of that. Ingrid's half right. So try parse is correct, but I have to make sure that it's a valid number. But what else do I have to check here? Can it be any number? Can any whole number? Because it's going to be an integer, so we know that. Can it be any whole number? Ah, there you go. Giselle snipered it. Yeah, we have to make sure that it is not going to be anything that is negative, right? Because we're going to be using this as the length of our array. So I can't really have a shelf with -2 boxes on it, right? That's not really a thing you can actually picture inside your head because it doesn't exist. And then if we do that, your whole code will be able to crash, which is not that good. Here you go. All right, so let's go ahead and exclamation point, and I'm going to put in those quotes, and I'm going to say int, because that is the data type that we're going to try to convert to, dot try parse. And the fancy name, by the way, is going to be dot syntax. That's just fancy for use a period. It basically allows us to go inside of the integer and start using its methods and properties. Now, remember, methods and properties are things it can do, right? Well, let me back that up. Methods are things it can do. Properties help describe it. Okay, so try parse is going to be a thing it does, so that's going to be a method. I'm going to put an open and closing parentheses. Now, for try parse, we have to put the string version first. So I'm going to put that num of video games string, because hey, that's the string version, a comma, the keyword of out, and that num of video games, the number version. Okay. Now we do have to do what Giselle said was and make sure that it's not going to be negative, right? So we have to figure out what we're looking at here. Well, we have to look at the number, right? So it has to come after the try parse, and we're going to make sure that this is anything that it has to be greater than 0. So we're kind of looking for wrong values when you think about it, right? So I'm going to say or. So is it a valid integer number, or is that number of video games, is it less than or equal to 0, right? Because say if I type in -2, is -2 less than or equal to 0? That's a true. And when we're using an or, even if we have one true, then the whole thing becomes true, and the while loop will trigger, which prompts the user for a valid answer. Does that make sense? Everybody with me? So inside of our validation loop, we have 3 things and only 3 things. The first thing we do is tell the user the error, right? So we're going to put a /r /n, which of course is just that new line return. It's the same thing as pressing enter on your keyboard. And we just put something kind of along the lines of only, oh, how about, let's be polite. Please only type in positive whole numbers. Then, of course, our second step is going to be that CW tab, then another set of double quotes, and then we're going to tell them their question again. Now, normally I actually try to rephrase the question a little bit differently because sometimes maybe the user didn't understand what we were asking for. And when I troubleshoot, I can then tell it's not my original prompt. I am now inside of my while loop prompt. So I try to make it slightly different, right? So I'm just going to say how many games, so I'm just leaving out the word video, do you want to keep track of? Slightly different, but still says the same thing, right? And then the third and probably most important thing of validation is to recatch their response. Now we have to make sure that we're using our existing variable that we already have declared. Now remember, declaring is when we put the data type, defining is when we give it a value. Okay, so we're going to redefine this variable. So we're going to say num of video games string equal to a console.readline, open closing, and a semicolon. And that is our full validation. So now we are sure after we get past this number, after this while loop, that we have a number that is a positive whole number that's greater than 0. Is everybody with me on that page? Everybody good? Let's go ahead and test this, by the way. So we can just run it and we can see that it reprompts for weirder things. So if we leave it blank, it's going to reprompt spacebar, 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 reprompt -5, reprompt. By the way, this is how I grade every single assignment. I start with nothing, just return spacebar, spacebar, usually -5, and then I can type in a 5, and then it should actually complete. Okay. So when you're testing your own work, try to break it like I do. All right, so now we are guaranteed that we have that positive value. So now what we're going to do is create a string array of that size. Okay. Now, this is kind of the tricky part for people because usually we always hard code this in the examples, but we're trying to like get you to put 1 plus 2 and then get 3 out of it, right? But sometimes it's hard to be like, wait, what? What do you want me to do in between? Kind of stuff. So let's create a basic array first. String, open, closing, square brackets. Let's name it. So let's call these video game. It's video games is fine. Then I'm going to set this equal to the keyword of new, because it's a complex variable. A new what? Well, a new string array, semicolon. Now, of course, it gives us that red squiggle. We look up. We must have the array size or the array initializer, right? Initializer, by the way, fancy for using curly brackets and then some starting values, okay? Now, what we need to do inside of here is normally before we had show you like, hey, you can put a 2 or a 4 or a 5 or something like that, but you can also put any integer, so num of video games. So that will go ahead and create this array of the size that the user types in. All right. Everybody with me so far? Perfect. So now that we have the array, what's blank, right? So we created it. We have the shelf. We're going to put those boxes up there, but now each one is going to contain null, right? Remember, null is fancy programming speak for empty box. So there is a box, but there's nothing inside of it. So now we have to fill it, right? So we're going to fill in the array elements. Now, before, we would always have to usually target them one at a time, something like video game, square bracket of 0 equals whatever that value is, right? But the problem is we don't know how many array elements there are, right? There could be 1 element, there could be 4 elements, there could be 17 elements. You know, never know how many people or how many video games people are going to collect. So what do we need here instead? What do you guys think? What do we need instead? Ooh, we have iPhone joining. Dun, dun, dun. I don't know who you are, iPhone, but hello. What do we need here? So instead of hard coding them by going index of 0 and index of 1 and so on, anybody know? Oh, we do need a read line, that is true. But how do we know how many times we should run it? What I'm getting at here is we need a loop, right? So we need to create a loop that will cycle through the array. Does that make sense? Because then for each, or well, it's actually a loop too, but we have to use a for loop. For every element inside of the array, prompt the user, get a value stored inside of it. Okay, so that's what we need to do here. All right, so we are going to create a for loop, open closing parentheses, open closing curlies, split those apart. Now, the important thing about the for loop when you're cycling through an array is you have to start it at an int I equal to 0. Why is it super important that we start this counting initializer at 0? Who can tell me? Why do we have to start it at 0? Yeah, good. Nice, Ingrid. It is the first element in the array because its index number is always 0. And then it goes up by 1, right? So that's why we start that at 0. Now our test is going to be I is less than our number of elements inside of our array. Well, we have a property for that. Remember, properties help describe that variable. So we're going to say video games dot length property. Length just gives us the total number of boxes or elements inside that array. Then a semicolon, and we have I++ because we are going to go up 1 at a time. All right. Now, up until this point, right, we've been dealing with array elements. So we had video game, something kind of like this, right? Square brackets with a 0 inside of it. Okay, obviously we need more to this. I'm not just going to leave it like that. But instead of going to be hard coding the 0, we're going to be using this counting variable instead of that, right? So we're going to get rid of that 0 and we're going to replace it with that I. Now what this does is it allows us to start to target each and every different element inside of this array, and it will run for the correct number of times. Now, I think Jasmine might have had this problem before. Make sure that your test is going to be correct, because if test is wrong and then it goes too many times or not enough times, then your array might be funky when you come out of it. Okay. All right. So this by itself doesn't really make sense. So we're going to go ahead and get rid of that. And we're going to go ahead and prompt the user for a game name. A game name. Okay, so console.writeLine, set of double quotes, backslash r, backslash an n. And what is a video game you own? Then we have to create a variable to catch it. So string, I'm just going to call it user game equals a console.readLine, open closing in that semicolon. Now, of course, after every single read line, we have validation. Oops, apparently it's screaming at you, validation. There we go. So we do have a while loop here, but who can tell me what kind of validation I need here? What kind of validation? What kind of validation should I be using here? Yeah, good, right? Giselle said it. We need to make sure that the user is typing in something, right? We just want to make sure that it's not blank. We're not asking specifically for specific names of it. So it's not like you can only choose Pac-Man, Q*bert, and whatever old video game I can think of, Space Invaders, right? Something like that. So we can really choose from a ton of video games. So that is going to use the string dot is null or white space, open closing, and then inside of here, that user game variable. Of course, we have our 3 steps in any validation. Please do not leave this blank. And I'm going to start with that backslash r and backslash an n, just so it's easier to read for us. Second step is always re-ask the question. Please type in a game name. And then to recapture that response. So user game equals console.readLine, open closing in a semicolon. All right. Now, after this validation, we're guaranteed that the user has typed in something and has not left it blank or any space bars, right? So now that we have that, what do we do with it? All right. What's our next step that we have to do? What do you guys think? We have a valid string. We know it's not blank. What do we have to do? We already did that one. We already caught the response. We already validated it. There you go. We need to put it in the array, right? So put it in the array. All right. Now this is where we have to do that video games, square brackets, and put something inside of there. And we're going to set it equal to that user game variable. Now it's really important that we figure out what number we have to put inside of there. So if we put a 0 in there, what it's going to do is it's always going to change this first element, and it's going to continuously change it over and over and over again. So we're ignoring every other box, and we're only putting it in index of 0, right? So that's not correct. So we need to do what we talked about earlier and just put I, right? So I, the first time it runs, it'll be 0. Then we say plus plus, and then it goes to 1, which is the second box on the shelf. Plus plus goes up by 1 again, gives us 2, which is the third box on the shelf. And it will continue going and filling up the whole entire array for us. Does that make sense to everybody? Everybody good to that point? Okay. So now that we have a full array, let's just go ahead and output the array. Well, since we used a for loop because we were changing the elements. Oh, hi, Adrian. Okay, so then so we're changing the elements, so we're going to put the for loop. So when we're just outputting elements, then we can just go ahead and use that for each loop. Open closing parentheses, open closing curly braces, and split those apart. Now remember, a for each loop creates a temporary variable. And then what it does is it takes the value of each element one at a time. So that's why we can't change it, because inside of this loop, we're only dealing with a temporary variable, right? So the key thing about this is we have to figure out what the data type of one individual element inside of this whole array of elements, okay? So the whole thing is a string array, but every individual element is a string, okay? So one individual element we're going to put as a string. Now we're going to name this temporary variable, and now normally what I do is just put it the singular of whatever multiple things I'm keeping track of. So if I'm keeping track of video games, then normally down here I'll just put video game. In, that's our keyword, that's why it turns purple. And in what? Well, in our array, so that's going to be our video games. Now in English, how you say this is for each string in video games. So for each video game in video games, do this. All right. And really, we're just going to kind of output it. So I'm going to put something like console write line. Let's put a game that I own is, let's do some simple concatenation first. And then let's put that temporary variable video game. All right. Let's go ahead and run it. Let's see what we get. All right. So let's try to break it. Enter. Nope. Spacebar, spacebar, spacebar. Nope. -5. Nope. 3. Perfect. And then it lets us by and it says, hey, what is your video game name? Return. Oh, please don't leave it blank. Spacebar, spacebar, spacebar. Trying to break it, right? All right, so I need some video games from you guys. I need 3 video games. So first one, oh, you were already on the ball before I even said it. You guys are all on the ball. All right. So Resident Evil. I spelled it wrong though. There we go. Perfect. How about spacebar? Nope. And Final Fantasy. Fantasy. Nope. Fantasy. Spelling. Ugh. And finally, Call of Duty. Perfect. Thank you very much. And after we do that, then we now output them. A game that I am is Resident Evil, Final Fantasy, and Call of Duty, right? So what it's doing is this will loop that many times. It will fill in these array elements, and then we can just output them right below it. Does that make sense to everybody? If you have any kind of questions about that one? That usually is pretty tricky. You do have questions? Okay, hit it. So, oh wait, you guys are good or you have questions? I kind of was like, eh. Let me put it this way. Does anybody have questions? Okay, everybody's good. There we go. All right, perfect. Okay, so that was kind of an arrays and loops kind of a review. Does anybody need anything about lists? Any questions about lists before we switch over that? Any questions on lists? Okay, it seems like everybody's good for lists as well. So let's jump to probably a better answer, Ingrid. Not yet. I don't have any. But yeah. All right, so let's go ahead and jump down to, oh, hit it. So you can either type your question or you can unmute yourself as well. Because there's only a few of us on here, so it's manageable.
Okay, can you hear me?
Can indeed.
Okay, so for so the loop that you utilize, the for each,
Sure.
is that the one that we'll utilize every time when entering the array?
Okay.
Or if I'm understanding.
Right. So the for loop is what you would do for putting stuff inside of an array. Okay.
Right.
Right. Mm-hmm. Because that allows us to actually access the elements directly. Because video game is the name of the dictionary, or well, name of the array, and then this would be the index number right here, and we can actually set those values, right?
Okay.
For each is only used to output stuff. You can't change anything.
Okay, so that would be the for each would be the one that we utilize to output the array, what we're utilizing in the array. Okay. Correct. Okay, I get it now.
So that's when you can't change any values. Perfect. Cool. All right. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
No problem. And it is Adrian, right?
Yes.
Go. I'm just making sure I said your name right.
You did. You're probably the first one to say it right.
I usually am horrible at names because, like, even before you got on, I was asking Jasmine how to say it. And I'm like, is it Jasmine or Jasmine? And I'm like, oh, I'm going to say it wrong. I'm one of those horrible people. But I always like to try to get it right, so I was trying to ask. Okay.
Yeah, no, I get you. Thank you.
Perfect. No problem. All right, so we have another question. Can you go over an example of combining 2 string arrays? That's so close to a homework example. I'm going to do something slightly different, but yes. How about that? All right. So instead of combining a string array and a string array, how about if I combine a string array and a decimal array? Dun, dun, dun. How about that? All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a string array. Good, she said she'll take it. All right, so what I'm going to do this one is, let's go with, what were the other things you want to talk about? Animes. And I'm going to set that equal to a new string array. And I'm just going to do 3. And then I'm going to do initializer. So remember, you can do initializers by putting those curly braces. And now we have to make sure that we put 3 values in. Okay, we could also leave this blank and then the initializers will automatically create the right amount of boxes. However, since we are going to be creating 2 arrays, we need to make sure that they have the same length or same number of elements to start combining them together. So I'm going to hard code that as 3 to make sure, and it forces the user to type in 3 things over here. All right, so I need 3 animes. I'm going to start one with my favorite one is Naruto. Oh, good one. Okay, Giselle. Oh, you guys all right. We already have enough. Perfect. I like My Hero Academia too. Dragon Ball Z I've never got into, but maybe I'm just not giving it enough time. All right, so let me get a Dragon Ball Z. Boom. And then finally we need one more, and that's going to be our My Hero Academia. All right, what's your favorite hero in My Hero Academia? What do you got? Ingrid, that's so cute that you think I'm young for that. I'm sure I'm older than everybody. I like it. Midnight, interesting. I was like Aizawa because I actually do cosplay. I think I mentioned it in my welcome video as well. But I did My Hero Academia and I did Aizawa. So it was kind of fun. Eraserhead if you want. Second favorite, I'll take it, but it was good. I 3D printed my own visor for it and everything. It was super neat. So it's kind of fun. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and create a decimal array. And we're going to say if we bought these on Blu-ray, how much would they be? So I'm going to call these ones anime costs. So I'm going to say equals a new decimal array, open, closing, and curlies and that semicolon. And I'm going to make sure that I put a 3 here because I need these to be able to match. So it's going to force me to put in 3 values. All right. Now, if I go to the store, I'm just going to assume that Naruto, because there's like probably 500 episodes and it took me like 3.5 months to get through it, I'm going to say that that one's probably $199.99. And I need to make sure that I do one thing after I type in the price because I'm dealing with a decimal. Can anybody tell me what that is? What I have to put after the price? Ah, Ingrid's right. M for money, right? So that's going to be there. Then I'm going to put a comma. And then let's see, which one's next? Dragon Ball Z, that probably has even more episodes. But let's go ahead and put them at $49.99 M. That's suffix in there. And My Hero Academia, relatively new. So I'm going to say that one's going to be $19.99. Nothing in the world costs that cheap, but you know, it's going to be for this one. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to output the anime and its cost, right? Okay, now for this one, this is going to be tricky, and you cannot use a for each loop. It just won't work. You have to do so much more. Well, I shouldn't say it won't work. You can totally make it work, but it takes so much more code to make it work that it's ridiculous, right? Because it's just not going to work. So the way to do this is to use a for loop, an open and closing parentheses, open, closing curlies, and split those apart. And inside of here, I'm going to go ahead and create my int I equal to 0, semicolon. Now, because these 2 arrays are the same size and we already know that they have to be, then I'm just going to make this I is less than, let's just say the first one, animes dot length. Whoops, dot length. There we go. And then I plus plus. All right. Now, why is this important, right? So if I just wanted to output all of the different anime names first, right? Can we, who can help me with that? If I just want to put out the anime names one after each other, what do I type inside of my console write line? What do you guys think? What should I type in here? Does anybody know? Ingrid's like, I. Perfect. Sort of. We have to put the array name first. So animes, then inside of our square brackets, that's how you actually do it, right? There you go. All right, so animes, square bracket of I. Let's go ahead and see that work first. Okay, oops, I forgot about this. 2, let's say boop and beep, perfect. Here we go, Naruto, Dragon Ball Z, My Hero Academia. So that at least gives us one of them out, okay? But now I really want the decimal cost in there as well, okay? So the only tricky part about this is I now have to cycle through the next array. Okay, well, let's put that in a separate line to start with. How would I actually output all values inside of the decimal? Who can tell me that? Inside of the decimal array, how would I get those out on a new line? What do you guys think? Yeah, good, right? So yeah, perfect. Multiple people got it, right? So it's going to be anime cost square bracket of I. All right, because we're still using the same I value that starts at 0. So if anime's square bracket is 0, that's going to give us our first anime, Naruto, right? Anime cost square bracket of 0, that's that I is going to be, then that gives us our 199. So now when we run this, we're going to put in our video games are going to be A and B, and there we go. Naruto is 199, Dragon Ball Z is 49, My Hero Academia is 1999. All right, well, I don't want them on separate lines, so what do? I combine them together. So I say something like curly braces 0 costs curly braces 1. Remember, this is just advanced concatenation. Hey, Giselle did it before I even said it. Nice, concatenation indeed. So this one is just going to need a comma afterwards. So we need this to be the anime name. So that's just going to be animes, square bracket of I. Another comma. This is going to be that cost, because that's the 1, right? And that's going to be anime cost, square bracket of I. All right, let's run it, see what we get. And here we go. Naruto costs $199, Dragon Ball Z costs $49.99, and My Hero Academia costs $19.99. Now, since we have those, we really don't need these, so I'm just going to go ahead and comment those out. And I'm also going to do one more thing. So when we had this, notice it was missing the dollar signs in front of it, right? So anytime we're dealing with money, we really want to show that we're dealing with money. Now, there's a couple different ways to do it. Obviously, one way, and the simple way, is just to put a dollar sign right there. That's it, right? But kind of a cooler way of doing it is at the end of this, right? Oh, you're there. Nice, Giselle. We're going to be using a .toString. So this right here is going to be 1 decimal value. So when we put a period after that, we can now go inside of the decimal value and we can use all the methods that it does. And one of them is going to be this toString. And what it does is it formats this decimal any way we want to. Now I have to put an open and closing parentheses inside of here. And you can put in different letters and it formats it different ways. And there's a lot of different stuff it can do, but the one I want to cover today is a text string of C, and C is going to stand for currency. Okay, currency. For some reason, it's getting me, oh, wait, I overdid that. There we go. Okay, so we have our anime cost, open closing square with an I inside of it, a period for that dot syntax, toString, a text string of C inside of here, C for currency. Now when we run it, go ahead and type in our video games first, and there we go. Now it automatically puts in that dollar sign, right? It puts in 2 decimal places and rounds to 2 decimal places. And if we had something really expensive, it would actually put in commas for us as well for the thousands place. So that's kind of neat. All right. Any other questions on this? Jasmine, does that answer your question without answering your question? Or did you still have more questions? Perfect. Okay, good. All right, moving on. Let's go ahead and talk about dictionaries for a minute. It's already almost 9. Do you guys want to stay for it's probably going to take 20 minutes. Everybody good for like 20 more minutes for some dictionary stuff? All right, at least one person staying. If one person, up, 2, 3, good. Everybody's in. All right, let's just do some dictionaries. Now, dictionaries are really kind of cool, but they're complex when you start like actually working with them, okay? But I'm going to tell you guys like how to think of it simpler ways, okay? So a dictionary is a lot like a list, okay? So it's still a shelf. We still have boxes. We put something in the box, okay? Now, the only difference is how we actually target the individual boxes. And even by targeting is, what is a label on a box? So in lists, we use the index number as the label for the box. So the first one is always 0, then we say 1, then we have 2 and 3, and so on and so on. But the user cannot control those numbers, right? Lists always start at 0, go up by 1. Arrays always start at 0 and go up by 1. Now, where dictionaries kind of are a little bit more complex is you can give that label on the box any data type you want to. It no longer has to be an integer starting at 0. You can make it a string. You can make it a decimal. You can make it a double. You can make it weirder things than that, but we're not going to go into that right now. Okay. So that's kind of the only real difference, is what is the label for the box. Now, in programming terms, what we call that is we call that a key. All right. So the key, you can think of that as the label for the box. And how do I know what box I'm targeting on the shelf? So you can kind of think of it as you're moving, and you have like sitting on the shelf, and you put in boxes from like the other house, and one says kitchen, one says bathroom, one says bedroom, right? You know exactly what's in the kitchen box. It's all your kitchen stuff. You know what's in the bathroom stuff. It's your bathroom stuff. And what's in your bedroom box, your bedroom stuff. So you can kind of keep track of it that way. Now, what you can't do is these keys have to be unique. So you cannot have multiple of the same boxes. So you can only have one kitchen box. You can't have two boxes that both say kitchen. So I'm going to put keys must be unique. And that's super important because a lot of people forget to test for this in their validation. So hint, 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 you guys are now in the code and know that you have to test for that. And there's a couple different ways to do it. Maybe contains key would be a good one. Hint, hint, hint. I'm just going to put that in my code. I'm not even going to make it hints. And we test this using contains key. Okay, good. There you go. All right. And so we have a key is going to be the label for the box. Now we also have a new programming term, and that's going to be called value pair. So you're going to hear that, a key and value pair. So mostly it's just the value. And that's going to be what's inside of the box. That's really the only difference about it. Okay. So what we're going to do now is, we discussed this earlier, we want to do superheroes. So let's create a dictionary of superheroes. Superheroes. Perfect. Yeah, Giselle, you got it. Without even me saying it, I like it. But then I spelled dictionary wrong. Womp womp. Okay, so for this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a key, and I'm going to make that the hero name, because we're only going to have one name for every different box on the shelf, right? So I know there's multiple Superman and there's multiple Green Lanterns and stuff like that. But for this example, we're going to say that every single hero name is going to be unique. And then the value pair, let's make that maybe their superpower. So superpower. There's only one Batman. That's not actually true, by the way, because when Batman got his back snapped, Azrael actually took over as Batman for a long time. And then a couple times, actually, Dick Grayson took over being Batman as well. Weird. Yeah, Batgirl. I think there's two Batgirls now too, because one is what's her face, who was spoiler for a little bit. I don't know. That Bat family has too many people. Giselle wins this game. She put, hey, here's what you need. You need string, string. And then she went, I'm Oracle. Boom. I like it. It's fun. You can stay. All right. So what we're going to do is the hero name and the superpower are going to both be their own data type, right? So that one's going to be a string, because that's going to be a name. And a superpower is also going to be a string. So the label on the box is a string. And then what's inside of the box is also going to be a string. So when we create our dictionary, we have a little bit of an issue, because it doesn't know what a dictionary name is. So when we're doing this, we have to make sure that we added the power to use dictionaries to our code, right? So the way we do that is we have to go to the top of our code and change this using system settings, all right? So what we can do is, one is we could hand type it. So we can just say using system.collections.generic, and then semicolon, right? And when you do that, you come back down here. Notice now dictionary is now green, which means it understands what it is. However, a lot of people don't remember this all the time. So what if you don't remember that? Let's go down here again. Notice now it's white again. Now, Visual Studio is a perfect code editor. Well, not perfect. Let me delete that. It's a good code editor because it gives you a lot of good tips on how to fix things, right? So one of the things you can do is come over here where it says, hey, you have an error, and you can click on the little drop-down menu, and then it says, hey, here's ways you can fix it, right? And the top one, it says, hey, how about adding using system.collections.generic? And then it gives you a preview of where it will add it at, right? So remember, before I click that, we took it out from up here. So we just have using and then namespace. So when I click on this down here, I have to be over that error, by the way. Click on the little quick tips. Click on that. Notice it turns green. And if I scroll to the top, it went ahead and added that line for us. Okay, so if you're ever forgetting what to do, just let the computer help you with it. Just make sure you're clicking the correct choice from that list. All right, so now we have our dictionary, and now we need open and closing carets. Now this is going to look a lot like a list, right? Because we would just put something like string inside of there if it was a list. However, we need both the key and the value. So this would just be the value in a list, right? Because int is automatically implied. So to add another one, we're going to have to add a comma in there, and then this is going to be our data type of our value. So this is our key data type. This is our value data type. Okay. Now we get to name it. So let's say hero, I don't know, roster list, hero power list. That's not really a list. Let's just call it hero powers. There we go. Keep it short. And then we're going to put an equal sign. So we're declaring it. That's what this does, right? We're putting that data type. And this whole thing, by the way, is the data type, dictionary string string. And so we're going to put a new, because it's a complex variable, and a new what? A new dictionary string string. Then we have to put an open and closing parentheses and a semicolon to start it. Now what this does is it gives us a blank dictionary. So this is giving us basically a shelf with nothing on it. So now we are ready to start adding things. All right. Now there's a couple different things you can do. We could start with starting values, by the way. Do you guys want to, actually, what's the least you want? So after the parentheses, let's put in open, closing, curly braces. Now usually go ahead and put return and then kind of split those apart a little bit because it looks a little bit nicer this way, but doesn't really need to be. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put in a matching key and value pair. Now, in order to keep them separate, we have to put open and closing curly braces inside of here as well. So inside of the curly braces, we need another set of the curly braces. Now, what we're going to need to do is type in the key first. So remember, the key is the hero name, and then a comma, and then whatever their power is. So give me a superhero and their power. What do you guys think? I need a superhero and their power. Ingrid, I have to take that because that's great. So she said Wonder Woman, and I'm going to put a comma because I have to separate the key and the value. And she said her superpower is just being awesome. Boom. I like it. Okay, so at least this starts us off with 1, right? Okay, now what we could do is, yeah, boom, indeed. Giselle, we're going to use yours in 1 second. Okay, so then what we're going to do is that is hard coding in some starting values. So what this did was created one element on the shelf with a label of a Wonder Woman, and then inside the box is going to be the word awesome, or text string of awesome. Now, if we wanted to add more to this, we could just by adding another comma after this. Then I usually press return so it's easier to read just for us humans. And then another set of quotes. And then Giselle wants flash. And then comma super speed. Boom, something like that. Okay, so there we go. All right. Now we have at least now another box on the shelf, flash on the outside, super speed on the inside. All right. Now, in order to be able to see these, I'm going to give myself some space because I'm going to do a couple things before this as well. But I'm going to go ahead and output the dictionary values. All right. Now, when we're outputting the dictionary, we have to make sure that we're going to be using a for each loop right now. Okay. So we're going to do a for each loop, open, closing parentheses, open, closing curly braces, and split those apart. Now, this is the weird one, right? Because what we need is a singular element data type, right? So right now our data type of our dictionary is string string. So we can't just put string because that doesn't make sense, right? We can't put string string because it's also going to give us an error and be like, what the heck is string string, right? But one individual element of a dictionary that is going to be string string, right, is going to be called a key and value pair, open, closing carets, and now we put string, comma, string. So we call one individual element a key and value pair. So this is going to be that new data type, all right? One individual thing inside of the dictionary. Now, after that, we put whatever name we want, because this is our temporary variable that we're creating in order to use it inside of our loop. So by default, most professionals will just put KVP. It's short for key and value pair, but really you can put whatever variable name you want there. But like 9 times out of 10, it's just going to be KVP. Then we have a keyword of in, and one of these things inside of what? Well, inside of our whole dictionary, which is going to be hero powers. All right. Now, if we just try to output this KVP by itself, you're going to see that it's going to look super ugly, and we're not going to do it this way, but I will show it to you because I know everybody's interested on just seeing what happens if you do console.writeLine KVP by itself. All right, when we run it, we got to get past our video games first. So we're going to buy 2 video games, A and B, and here we go. Wonder Woman, awesome, Flash, super speed. But notice it automatically puts it in these square brackets, and you can't actually do anything with it because this is how it formats it. It formats it as blah, 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 comma, space, blah, 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 right? There's no way to get past it. So instead of doing this, and I'm actually going to put this in our code, I'm going to comment that out. Actually, let's comment that out and put above it, do not do this. Boop, 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 boop. Nope, don't do that. Okay. Instead, what we have to do is we're going to have to use each individual component of our key and value pair. So what are the 2 components that make up a key and value pair? Well, it's a key and a value pair, right? So what we can do is instead, console.writeLine, we're going to use our KVP, but we're going to have that dot or that period, right, for our dot syntax. Now, when we do that, we can actually then use 2 more properties of it. So remember, properties help describe it. One of them is the key, and the other is the value, right? So if I do kvp.key, what that's going to do is it's going to give us the label for each of the individual boxes. So let me go ahead and skip down to it. And here we go. This spits out Wonder Woman and Flash. Those are the 2 labels for the boxes, just giving us the keys. Now, this is really great for anytime you're giving the user a list of things to choose from, saying, hey, choose one of these things out of the dictionary. Here is the list of choices out of the dictionary, because here are all the valid keys that I currently possess, right? The other thing we could do is do kvp.value. Obviously, that's going to be what's inside of the box, right? So 2A and B, and here we go. Now we're looking inside of the box. Number 1, that's awesome. And the second box is super speed. So that will just give us that. Okay, so now we have looked on the outside and the inside. How do we combine it together? That's just going to be something kind of like a text string of blank has the power of blank. And again, I'm just using that advanced concatenation, right? So giving us spaces, that's the curly braces. By the way, they always have to start at 0. If you don't, things will give you errors. So start at 0 and then a 1. Outside of our text string, put a comma. Now here we need our kvp.key, because that's going to be our superhero name, like the Flash, has the power of, then a comma, kvp.value. Okay, so when we do that, let's go ahead and take our video games. Here we go. Wonder Woman has the power of awesome, and Flash has the power of super speed. Everybody with me so far? By the way, just to kind of give us a little bit more of a break here, I'm just going to put in a console.writeLine, and I'm just going to put in maybe a whole bunch of dashes. That's pretty much about it. And then a /r, /n, maybe above and before it, or below it, I mean. That's pretty good. Oops. All right. Any questions at this point? So we have created a dictionary, string. We have output that dictionary using our kvp.key and our kvp.value. Everybody good? All right. So now what we can do is, how about adding a different value, or adding a value later? Value later, right? Well, dictionaries have a ton of different methods and properties. So one of them is going to be add. So we type in the name of the dictionary, a period for that dot syntax, add, open and closing parentheses and a semicolon. Back inside of here, we're going to have to put, what do we want to add? Well, we need 2 pieces of information. Oh, Giselle, you are good at this. She said, hey, we need a hero name, and then we also need a hero power. Right. So let's go ahead and hard code one. So let's say, how about, let's do a weirder one. How about, what is a weird superhero name? Actually, not really weird, but I like Falcon. So let's do Falcon from the Marvel universe, and his is the power of flight, right? So Falcon flies, and actually he's a mutant, by the way, that can talk to birds, but that's little known and not really in the movies. So he has a little falcon that he keeps on his arm called Red Wing, who kind of sends out. But let's see if that just does anything, and see if it automatically puts itself in our for each loop down here. So we have to run it, of course. Let's put 2 video games, A and B, to just get past it because we're already done with that. And here we go. Wonder Woman has the power of being awesome, Flash has the power of super speed, and Falcon has the power of flight. So we went and added one in, and then it automatically got put inside of our for each loop as well. Okay. Now this is an example of just hard coding these values to go inside of here, right? But we could easily create variables to hold those values as well. So like string hero name equals, give me another hero name, you guys. What's another hero name you want? And I'm going to create a string, and I'm going to call that hero power. And I'm going to set that equal to something different. Okay, so somebody said Wolverine, who, by the way, is one of my favorites to cosplay as well, because that's always fun. So Wolverine has the power of what? Well, his main power is actually healing, right? That's his main ability, mutant ability. And then his bone powers are always much weirder as well, right? Because his claws are actually made of bone that pop out of his skin as well. And then weirdly, they got coated with adamantium later. All right, so now we actually have 2 strings. So now what we could do is we can actually use that add command to add them to it. So hero powers dot add, open closing, and a semicolon. So now we can do hero name, making sure that these are in the correct order. Key always comes first, then value pair, and hero power. All right, something kind of like that. Ingrid said he also has a smell power. Yeah, I think he does too, but he has a lot of different stuff. Do you know ultimately he was going to be a mutated Wolverine, like literally a Wolverine? And I was like, ugh, glad they didn't do that. And here we go. Wolverine has the power of healing. So he's going to be right there in our list. Now, why did I do this though, right? Well, this is an example of hard coding that string because I'm still putting as Wolverine. However, any string variable could come from a read line, right? So you could easily prompt the user for these different string variables and add them in later as well. Hint, 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 you're gonna have to do this for your homework. Something kind of like that, right? So that's kind of how we can run it, right? So we can actually add, we can remove things. The videos cover these much more in depth as well. That's pretty much about it. You know what we probably should do is maybe prompt the user for once, because I do want to show you guys how to use that console, not console, delete, contains key just as your validation as well. All right. So let's prompt the user. Prompt the user for their favorite superhero. Okay. So a console write line. Set it double quotes, \r, \n, and then we're going to say, what is your favorite superhero? Question mark. Now, of course, since we got a question, right, now we have to catch it. So we have to say, we already used user one, didn't we? I don't think we did, actually. So we can call this one user hero equals console. Oops, maybe if I get that right. Console.readLine, open closing, and a semicolon. Now, this is where this gets a little bit tricky here because we do have to do validation, right? But what are we going to check for? Of course, we're going to check, is it blank? So blank, and what? What do we have to reprompt if the user types in? Could we have two? Nope, not numbers. No. We could have a hero called like 7, right? Maybe 2. I think there is actually a superhero called 13, but I think it's like Tracy 13. I don't remember her actual name. So we have to make sure that we're checking for, is it unique, right? We can't have them type in Wonder Woman because then we'll have 2 boxes called Wonder Woman, which will then freak our thing out. Oh, there you go. 13 from My Hero Academia. Perfect. Thanks for making it valid, Giselle. I appreciate that. So we have to make sure that it is unique and not already in the dictionary. That's the important part of that one, right? So we have our while loop, of course, open closing parentheses, open closing curlies, and split those apart. Inside of here, let's do the easy one first. String dot is null or white space, open closing parentheses, and inside of there, user hero. All right, then we have to say or. So if the user leaves it blank, or if it's already inside of my dictionary. Now, we talked about that a little bit earlier, but that is that contains key. So how we use it is hero powers, the name of the dictionary, dot contains key. Contains key is the method, and all it is a test that's going to return a bool, right? A bool is a data type that either contains a true or a false. So it's either true or false. Now remember, that starts or stops things, because we can kind of consider them as like the programming switches of the programming world, right? Like a light switch is either on or off. I guess unless you have a dimmer switch, but let's not go that route. So inside of here, we're going to put that user hero. So if it already contains that key, so if somebody types in Wonder Woman, so it says, is Wonder Woman in hero powers, we're going to say Boolean of true, and it's going to say, hey, don't type in one that we already have in our list, right? Okay. So let's type in, first thing is the error message. I'm just going to put error because we're kind of strapped on time right now. Then we're going to put question, because we're just going to re-put our question back in there. And then we're going to do the most important thing, which is going to be that user hero equals our console dot read line. Open closing in that semicolon. All right. Now, what are we guaranteed after this validation? What are we absolutely guaranteed from the user? What do you guys think? Anybody? Yeah, we're guaranteed we have a hero name that is not already inside of our dictionary. So it is a unique hero name. So that's kind of the cool part. So now we have a hero name, but we still need one more piece of information from the user before putting it inside of our dictionary, right? Because dictionary needs two pieces of information, the hero name and their matching power. So a key and our value pair, right? So let's prompt the user for that. So prompt the user for a power. So we're going to do a console write line, set of double quotes, /r, /n, and put what is the main power of, and then we'll just put a plus sign for concatenation. We'll do that user hero, I guess plus sign again, because I didn't think about that, and then a question mark. So now we're at least saying, hey, okay, great, you typed in Captain America. What is Captain America's main power? So then we have to catch it. String user power equals console.readline, open closing in that semicolon. Now we have validation. Now tell me this. We have to check if it's blank, of course, because we can't have a blank person, right? But what do we have to check besides that? Or do we have to check anything else besides that? What do you guys think? And while you guys are thinking about that, I'm going to go ahead and type in the while loop, just being blank. Right, so string dot is null or white space, open closing, and inside of there, user power, whoops. All right, we have a couple different things going on there. What do you guys think? By the way, don't type just error in here like I'm doing. Actually, write it out. We're just doing this because we're kind of short on time. Okay, we have a lot of different stuff going on. I'm going to type in user power equals console.readline, open and closing, and semicolon. All right, so here people say, how about we use contains or contains value or try get value? Those are all things we could do, but tell me this. What is the power of Superman, right? Well, he's invulnerable and he flies and stuff like that. But what if I said fly? Okay, well, Falcon can fly as well. Can I have multiple heroes that have the same power? Yeah, you can, right? So we don't really need to use a contains value, which, by the way, is a thing that you could do, just like it's contain key. There is a contains value, but ask yourself, does it make sense to check for it? because could two things be the same? Yeah, they probably could. And the cool thing is, it's not going to wreck your program by having multiple of the same values. Each key has to be unique, but what we store inside of it can be repeated. So really, the only thing we have to do is check for blank. Okay. Now, we're guaranteed we have a hero. We're guaranteed they typed in something for a power. Now let's go ahead and add it to our list. So that is hero powers dot add, open closing, and that semicolon. And inside of here, we have our user hero, comma, user power. Everybody with me so far? Everybody good up to this point? While you guys are thinking about it, I'm going to run it so we can see what it works. 2 video games, A and B. Here we go. What is your favorite superhero? So my favorite superhero is Ant-Man, but I like the original. So what is the main power of Ant-Man? He can shrink. That's what his power is. And there we go. Adds it to the list. Ant-Man has the power of shrink. I guess it's maybe shrinking. I don't know. What do you want? All right. So now that was a good thing, but what about if the user types in something bad, right? So we already tested those, but what if they leave it blank? Nope. Error question. Spacebar, spacebar, spacebar. Error question. Okay. What if we type in Wonder Woman? Oops, error question, because remember, you have to be unique, and Wonder Woman was already in our list. However, did we ever tell the user what the list was before asking them that? Not really. So a good thing to do before asking for something is to show them what you already have inside of it, right? To make sure that they're not going to be repeating things, but they know why they're getting that error message more than anything else, okay? Tell me this, though. How about if I type in Wonder Woman? Oh, good. That took it. Why? And while you think about that, I'm going to type in Lasso of Truth. Actually, I'm going to leave it blank first. Boop. Nope. Nope. Okay. Lasso of Truth. Why did it let me type in Wonder Woman and Wonder Woman? Yeah, Giselle got it, right? It's the case of it, because I capitalized the W in Wonder and the W in Woman, and down here it's all lowercase because it's case sensitive, right? So you got to make sure that you're watching out for that. And there's a couple different ways to do it. You can use .to lower, but really for these kind of beginning examples, I'm not really going to be concerned too much about the case sensibility of that. Okay. All right. Any questions? We covered a lot today. Any questions about this? Any questions about any of the dictionaries, any of the for loops, any of the loop arrays or lists, or anything else? Because we went a little bit over, but thanks for sticking with me, you guys. I appreciate that. All right, it looks like nobody has any kind of questions, so I'm going to go ahead and end this recording here. But if you guys are watching this later on YouTube and have questions, jump onto Slack in our ITD2 channel and ask away in there, and happy coding.